Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Always an Expat, a podcast dedicated to elevating expat stories, brought to you by fellow expat, yours truly, Richard Taylor, and Plan First Wealth. My guest today is Richard Fielding. Richard is the VP and Principal of Media Solutions at Circana. Richard has lived and worked in the greater Chicago area for the last 20 years, but prior to that, he spent 5 years in Hong Kong, Kuala Lumpur, and Jakarta. And before that, he lived in the UK. But as an Air Force family, what they would call here an army brat, but I don't like that, so I'm not going to call him that. Richard's family moved around a lot, and as a result, Richard doesn't particularly identify with any one place in the UK that he would call home, in the same way that I think most expats do, and in the same way that I would call Bolton home, for example. So there's lots to unpack there, and I'm especially looking forward to investigating Richard's current attitude towards obtaining US citizenship, so I'm just putting on notice on that. But before we get into it, I have to just read a short disclaimer. Always an Expat is affiliated with Plan First Wealth LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of Plan First Wealth. Information presented is for educational purposes only. So, without further ado, let's get straight into it. Hi, Richard. Welcome to Always an Expat.
Thank you, Richard. Always good to meet another Richard, but very pleased to be here.
Good. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Did I get that right in the intro, or
did
I stray too far?
It's actually 23 years in the greater Chicago area. So, but who's counting, right? But yes, I think that was pretty much it in terms of kind of like, my background and where I've been.
Yeah.
I'd say probably the only thing missing on that bit, especially, and I think it is kind of relevant to this conversation, is I think I started being an expat actually when I was 3 years old, because that was when my family and my father was posted to Malaysia, and we lived out there for 3 years. So actually I started being an expat.
Wow.
when I was a toddler. So
wow.
And then actually ended up, as you mentioned in your intro, actually ended up working and living back in Malaysia for a couple of years when I was an adult.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's use this to go right back to the beginning. I didn't realize it was 3 years old, but tell us where it all began and let's trace your journey to today.
Yeah. Well, as you said, it kind of like that time I was an army brat, and actually that in our previous discussion about that, it prompted me to go and find out about that, because to your point, it's like that kind of sounds quite pejorative, but it actually stands for British Regiment Attached Traveller. So I know. I've been one all my life, and I didn't realise that. So
I love it when you find out things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So like anything, in terms of military services, of course, it's an acronym. But
I need to go back now and take out that I don't like it, because now I do like it. Now I know that.
Yeah, so
I've changed my opinion.
But yeah, I mean, I'm a classic army brat. My father was a career officer in the Royal Air Force, so my whole childhood was quite nomadic in terms of moving around where he was stationed. It was probably on average about every 2.5 years. So the majority of that was in the UK. But as I said, we had a stint in Malaysia by the time I was when I was 3 or 5. So that's when I think you're first starting to form your memories. So I have, I don't know whether those are kind of like, real memories, or because I've seen photos and, I kind of, went back actually to where I grew up when I was in Malaysia again. But I have some vague memories of that time there. But yeah, I mean, as I said, I mean, that's the life, that's the kind of childhood and the life I've known. So I don't really know any different. The only time I know it's different is when I meet, and I have met other people that have basically lived and grown up in the same place all their life, and you suddenly realize that actually isn't your lived experience. And so, I think in terms of what that kind of gives you, I think that, that kind of gives you, I think in terms of a fairly unique perspective in terms of, not having a single rooted, community, and it kind of normalizes the fact that you have multiple homes and you go to multiple schools, So you learned, I think, to make friends quickly, and I think you learned to adapt, fairly quickly. So.
What was that like? I mean, it's hard for you to, I guess, answer that because you have no, like you say, you have no other.
Yeah,
Compared to what? It's the only life I
yeah.
knew. But every 2.5 years in those critical formative years, what it's really unique. I'm sure you meet other army brats and they can relate. But tell me,
Yeah,
as a non-army brat, what was that like?
yeah. I mean, looking back on it, I think, it was what it was. I mean, I think as I got a little bit older, my father, he had a couple of tours in the same place, so we could actually have, when I was getting towards, this is going to sound very English, O levels and A levels. So that kind of like the back end of my education, I attended the same school, and we didn't move because he was actually posted to the MOD, the Ministry of Defence, so he could actually commute down there from where I basically grew up, which is in Huntingdon in Cambridgeshire, for those kind of like those latter years of schooling. My two brothers actually we all went to public school, but I didn't particularly like that. I think that was the rebellious side of me, so I made it fairly clear that wasn't really the lifestyle for me, so I kind of left and went to a local comprehensive.
Really?
So yeah, that's another part of it. Unlike my two brothers, so I kind of had a slightly different experience there as well. But in that regard, I kind of there was a little bit of continuity there. But otherwise, yeah, you're right. It was like you were a new kid in school. So you walked in and you kind of like you were. A number of times I know what it's like to be kind of like walk into a classroom and everyone looks around and
Yeah.
who are you? So as I said, I think from my perspective anyway, you learn to make friends pretty quickly, and you adapt. But yeah, I mean, I think the main point, like I said before, I didn't really have anything to compare it against. So to me, that was normal. That's what you did. But I think if I look, I think kind of a bit of COD psychology after that. I think that if I then look at my life, especially after, I think that when I had the opportunity to move from the UK, so I actually left the UK, as said in your intro, I left in '95. So I've actually been an expat out of the UK, for 28 years now. I think when I had that opportunity to move for a job in Malaysia, that wasn't as probably daunting as maybe it would have been to some other people. And I remember my friends at the time, although it was a 2-year contract, that I subsequently found out they all had a bet on how long I'd last. That I think the longest was about 6 months. So I think 28 years later, I think I probably won that bet.
Why do you think they did that?
I think it was because I had a good. I've always been a fairly social person. I've had a really good set of friends, and I've still got a lot of friends back in the UK. I think that they probably thought, I'm leaving. I was like established and working in London. I had my own flat there. I had a really good life there, and I think that they probably thought, well, you're moving halfway across the world. You don't know anybody there. You'll have no friend group. You'll be away from home. You'll just. I think they were probably projecting their own
Totally.
mindset onto that. I mean, I think half jokingly that they said 6 months, but it wasn't. Yeah, they thought I would definitely come back pretty quickly. So that's probably the way I look at it. But I mean, as you can probably tell, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and just embraced it. I thought it was an amazing opportunity.
Well, I think I think like you say, it's probably projecting their own mindsets because it makes it easier to justify not doing that if you sort of speculate on why it's a bad idea for someone else to do it. You don't have to think about.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. So do you know when you do think back to the UK and growing up, where you went to high school or secondary school, is that if you think of a home, if you do have a home base in the UK, is that what you think of or not?
No, I think that's a good question, Richard. Not really. I mean, I think probably there's an element of recency to it. So I think that if kind of like when I think of the UK, I think you're right. I mean, when I am still very proudly, British and English. I mean, I'm still an English citizen. I'm not, even though I've lived here for 23 years, I've got a green card, obviously, but I'm not a US citizen. But I don't, yeah, you're right. If someone says, where are you from? Everywhere and nowhere tends to be my kind of like pat answer, But I think from a recency perspective, it's where, so my parents retired and they moved to West Sussex, a little village actually called Chelwood Gate. Probably the only time Chelwood Gate would get a mention on any podcast. But then my father passed a few years back, so my mother still lives she moved to East Grinstead, which is still West Sussex, not that far from Gatwick and Brighton. And my two brothers, I'm one of three sons. They live in the same area as well. So I would say when I tend to go back, it's obviously I've got a lot of friends in London, but it would be to the East Grinstead area, which is where my family still is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm intrigued. When you look back on your decision not to go to public school and your brothers went, looking back now, 25, 30 years later, how do you view that decision? Are you good, bad, indifferent?
Yeah. I mean, I think, I think it was good. I mean, at the time, I just, I did start there. I just didn't have a very happy time there for whatever reason. I mean, I didn't, I don't think I was quite cut out for all the regimented order and, kind of like rules. And I was, we were boarding there because I think that was one of the elements of, army brat life, is that if you move along, you don't get any continuity of education. So, the Air Force actually does kind of subsidize, or it did at the time, the public school fees, which again, I know is actually sounding very English here because public schools are private schools. So when we say public schools, we actually mean it's a private school. I know it sounds completely the wrong way around there, but I think you probably know what I mean, Richard.
I do.
And I started there and I left. So no, I stand by my decision. I kind of like it was pretty. It was pretty. I don't know if traumatic's the word, but it was because my two brothers were still there. It was definitely kind of, it was a thing at the time. But then I adapted like I normally do when I moved. It was another school, another set of friends, and I was there for about 4 or 5 years. Had a great education and went off to Manchester.
I know a few people who went to boarding schools, various ages, so not my age necessarily, and not without exception, but most of them absolutely love it or look back on it with immense fondness. But when they tell stories from the time, they sound horrendous.
Oh yeah,
awful. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy kind of stories, let alone put my child in that environment.
No, I this probably, I've got this is probably a conversation or a broader conversation for another time, but absolutely. I mean, I think you kind of like my older brother absolutely loved it. I mean, he just he loved it, and he still goes back for Old Boys Day, and he just really embraced it. My younger brother, not so much, but he stuck it out, and I just didn't like it. And I was just very conscious. I mean, I've got three kids, and I would personally, I would never send them away. But that's just me. So I can definitely relate to that, Richard, because I've got plenty of other friends who were like army brats who were sent away to boarding school for that very same reason. And I think there's stories across the full spectrum of that, from people who just, to your point, like absolutely loved it, and I can just go, I so can't relate to that, but respect your opinion. To people who are more probably on my side of it, just like going, that is not something that that you would want to wish on your worst enemy. But there you go. Character building, I guess, is what we say in England.
Character. Okay. Right. So let's talk about leaving the UK. Malaysia. So I said Kuala Lumpur, Jakarta. So I took a stab. I knew it was Malaysia and Indonesia, right? So I assumed you lived in. Tell us how you ended up there. Tell us what life was like.
So my career took me to London, and I was working for a media research company down there. They were actually the ones that did all the TV ratings. So I know it's like the Nielsen ratings in the US, but they were the company that kind of did the TV ratings. So I backed into that because I actually, after I left Manchester,
is that who tells us how many millions of people
correct,
watch Dirty
yes.
Den
and it's
get murdered in
yeah,
EastEnders or something?
It's the currency of advertising, basically, because obviously kind of like the or programming. So people who work out what programs are the most popular and we're going to get commissioned and on whatever, and how you schedule programming. But also, more importantly, for commercial television, it's the currency of advertising. So you want to know who and how many people are watching certain programs. So when you are targeting them with your advertising, you know where to best place your advertising.
I wonder what that says about me, that in the moment I was reaching for a major, pivotal TV moment in British history, I reached a Dirty Den in EastEnders. Like, I'm a Coronation Street boy.
Right.
I don't know why I went there.
Yeah.
This is completely off topic. Have you seen like an episode of EastEnders or Coronation Street recently?
Oh no. I mean, at least I know what you're talking about. But I must admit, I was never really much of a soap opera. But I was kind of there at the time, just before I left, when it was the Coronation Street versus EastEnders, and it was just that. Yeah.
I watched a lot of Coronation Street growing up, and then as a young adult before I left, just because it was on at 7:30 at night or whatever times that, and somehow it popped up on my TV in the past year, and I watched an episode or two, and it's farcical. I don't know how people watch, I'm assuming it was the equivalent of that when I was watching it. I don't understand how it was made, how it was on TV. It was bizarre. Honestly, it was bizarre watching it. I just couldn't comprehend. Maybe it's because I stopped watching soap operas altogether. I don't watch any American ones. Days of Our Lives and that malarkey, but it was bizarre. But anyway, took us well off topic there. So tell us.
No, that's okay. I was just trying. That was the background of the company I was working for, and I was just and I was approached at a conference, and an equivalent company that were just setting up the similar type of technology. So it was the way, and I won't bore everyone here, but they're kind of TV meters, so they're electronic meters in your house that you basically, that's how, and it's a sample of households. They were setting up a new panel in Malaysia, and they approached me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in going out there and working and helping setting up that panel in Malaysia?" So I think in the interview process, I think they were actually quite impressed that not only I knew where Malaysia was, but I'd actually, till I said before, I'd actually lived there. So that was kind of a bit of an irony. But I think, to your point in our earlier discussion, I think maybe some other people would have gone, "Oh my God, what, leave London?" And to me, I went, "Oh my God, that's amazing." And I think from a career perspective, and I think this is definitely I think relevant to me, doing that when you go and you become an expat and you work abroad, you are exposed, and you accelerate your career far more than you would do if you were if I had stayed in London, because it's a London's a huge pond with lots of people and lots of competition for that, whereas you go abroad and there's less people, you just basically get exposed to a lot more of everything, basically. And so I've been really in a lucky position for the majority of my career, that I've always been kind of headhunted, as they say, or approached, and someone's then from a job and said, "Oh, would you be interested in this job?" So I was actually they said, "Would you be interested?" They flew me over for an interview, and I did that, and kind of was made my mind up even more, and bit the bullet. I mean, I remember actually my mother, when she was helping me kind of like pack, she was in kind of she was, tears were rolling down her cheeks, because I think she said, "I don't think you're coming back. I don't think you'll come back." And I think like they say, mothers know. She was right, so even though I was telling her at the time, "It's only 2-year contract, I'll be back before you know it," whatever. So, and when I was there for about 6 months, and then another company, actually there was an agency in Hong Kong, approached me and said, would you be interested in working for us and being a research director for Asia. And at the time, I said, it's a really interesting opportunity. I've only been here for 6 months. That's not fair to the company that brought me over. So I said, thanks, but can we shelve it? And kind of actually 2 years later, they came back to me again and said, with that position's opened up again, would you be interested? And that's how actually I kind of ended up in that job in Hong Kong. But as I said, I was just one thing led to another. Obviously, I met a bunch of other expats over there because you kind of you gravitate to that kind of community, and it was a vibrant community. I have amazing memories. I almost kind of say I lived 10 years in 5 years there in terms of like basically what I did, where I traveled, I looked through these old photographs and I was like going, oh my God, I did that in 5 years. It was unbelievable. And I know I'm just really, really lucky that, kind of like right time, right place. Because I think that expat jobs and expat opportunities are very different than they were, 30 odd years ago.
I think they are, and they're not. They are in that there's still adventure. They are in that there's still a way to get ahead very quickly because, as you say, more opportunity, smaller pond. But the world is much more globalized now.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't say for sure, but I just don't think moving to Hong Kong or somewhere like that today is the same as moving 25 years ago, and it won't be the same in 25 years' time. It's just different times.
Yeah.
But Hong Kong's a great place. It's very sad what's happening to it right now, but it's a great place. I imagine I can imagine you had a lot of fun there.
It was just post handover. So
of course,
I moved there in '98, so it literally was it was just post handover, which was an interesting time because I think again it was still the only immediate difference I saw there really was before the handover. Obviously, if you were an English citizen, you could just literally take a flight to Hong Kong, and if you had a British passport, you could just basically live and work there.
Oh, really?
Anywhere else. And so there was they actually had it, talking about acronyms and army brat, there was also an acronym there called FILTH, which was failed in London, try Hong Kong. I don't know if you've heard that one.
I've heard.
Which I always kind of thought that obviously ended with the handover, and then actually the largest expat population in Hong Kong became Americans, actually, because of the financial center and all the banks there. So that was kind of, but in terms of the experience I had there, again, unbelievable, because China was just starting to open up as well. And the company I was working for had a lot of clients, and we had offices in China. So I got to go to Guangzhou and Shanghai and Beijing on business, and, again, just use that as a base as well in terms of just was able to travel extensively. I'm a real firm believer in that travel is the best education, and I'm really encouraging my kids to travel. We're lucky that we have a really close English family of ours, and every kind of 2 years we kind of plan a trip that we would go somewhere abroad with our kids. So we've done Sri Lanka, we've done Costa Rica, we've done south of France, and it's specifically to give Sri Lanka was a very favorite one of mine because it really gave my kids an opportunity to think, God, we are not in Kansas anymore. This is just such, we're not in Oak Park, Illinois, and it was amazing to see how they reacted and adapted to that, and kind of and talking back with them as well, just kind of talking about their experiences from that. And I think that was kind of a very mini expat lens I think I'm putting on it, in terms of really dropping some people in. We were lucky enough to be there for 2 weeks, so it was a decent amount of time for them to experience a very, very different culture.
China was like that for me. So I went to China in 2006. And having previously, I'd travelled to America a couple of times. I'd been around Europe quite a lot as a kid. And landing in China, that's the first time I realized I knew I was somewhere very different. France is different, but it's France.
Yes,
Europe is, I love, Europe's one of the things I miss most about being here, to be honest. I totally took for granted. America, we think it's the same. It's only when you live here you realise it's not. But China, spent 2 or 3 weeks in China, and I'll be honest with you, I could not wait to get out at the end of it.
Yeah.
And then we went to Hong Kong, and then we were in Vietnam. And a couple of weeks later, looking back, reflecting on it, I was like, wow, that was actually, I'm never going to forget. That was phenomenal. I was truly different. And I wish I could go back. Well, I will go back eventually, but I wish I'd approached it with a different mindset. Like I expected China to be one thing. It was something completely different. It freaked me out after a while, and I didn't enjoy it at the time. But looking back, I enjoyed it and I learned a lot. And I wish I'd had a better mindset.
Yeah,
it's so different.
I can definitely relate to that, Richard. I think that it's kind of interesting. I mean, one of my, that kind of like that 5-year stint in Asia, I think one of my endearing memories of that was we did a trip. I had some friends come over from the UK, and we did a trip to East Malaysia. And part of that, we went down on these longboats to these kind of and stayed with these tribes that are probably only about a generation ago were actually real they're kind of like quote unquote headhunters.
Yeah. Wow.
And so there was, I think it was 3 of us. We went upriver. It was a bit kind of like Apocalypse Now-ish with obviously without the Kurtz compound. But we literally, they did not speak a word of it. I mean, not even like, sometimes when you go and you kind of think, oh, well, there's certain things that, certain words, nothing. Yeah. So it was all sign language. Me and my friend, we actually ended up playing a game of football or soccer with these kids out in the back, because someone had this kind of, ball made of, plastic bags or something. And it was it was just it's such an experience, because you didn't need language for that, and we played, and they thought that we were, I'm quite tall, I'm 6'4", and my friend was pretty tall, so they thought we were we were like these white giants from a different planet. Well, goodness knows what was going through their mind, actually, because we couldn't communicate to understand that. But it was such a visceral experience in terms of like it wasn't until I looked back on that and it was like going, oh my God, I was like in the middle of the jungle kicking, a ball around with these kids, and their smiles on their faces, and the laughter that we had around that was just, amazing. And I don't think you do really fully appreciate it at the time until you're out of that and you look back on it and you think, oh my God, that was actually something that I will never experience, probably, again. And just, so I can definitely relate to that in terms of just this experience of like going, wow, I am so out of my out of every comfort zone.
Yeah, I can appreciate a little bit what you refer to. The leader of our tour was like a 6'4", 6'5" Aussie guy. Not just tall though; he was just massive in every way. Long hair, really long hair, big beard, and people would just stop and stare at him in the street, in the train stations, which were wild. Those train stations were wild in Beijing. Beijing's nuts. Like the vastness of the buildings in Beijing, like takes your breath away. Post office, it's an entire city block. It's just crazy.
I mean, I think it. Yeah, I mean, it's like the numbers. Numbers take on a different meaning when you're in China in terms of just basically population, size of cities. Just, I mean, it is just. I mean, the only other experience I've had of that was similar to that was when I was in Mumbai for a week on business as well, and they kind of like they take you to the train station at rush hour because they kind of take the foreigners there to kind of show them what it's like. I mean, it was just insane. I mean, I think Mumbai has a population around about 80 million people, and I felt like after a week I'd met every single one of them. I mean, it was just it was it was crazy. Yeah.
Did you go and see the Great Wall of China?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did. Yeah.
We did a 2-day hike over that and finished it off with like a zip line, and it's one of the best things I've ever done in my life, and I absolutely hated the last day. Hated every minute of it. It's one of those where you're going up and down, and then when you're going down, after a while, down is so much worse than going up because you're jarring with every step, and I
Yeah.
just complained and bitched and moaned, and I was exhausted and I hated it, and now I look at it as a truly like a wonderful moment. I just
Yeah.
complained
Well,
the whole
yeah,
time.
it's
It's
kind
an
of
amazing thing.
Yeah, and you tell that to someone else, and they're like, "Oh God, you spoiled idiot." I've never been a chance to go to China before, but yeah, we were lucky enough that we were staying with an expat who was based in Beijing, so he took us to kind of like not the touristy part of it. So because obviously there's quite a lot of wall to choose from, so we drove to quite a remote area of it,
Yeah.
and didn't do a 2-day hike, but that to me just brought home the vastness of it, because you were where it was kind of like not so. I mean, we just had freedom to just wander, on it where we are. So I don't really remember. I wasn't bitching and moaning because we definitely weren't hiking for 2 days.
I was
but
exhausted.
yeah. But it's I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? I mean,
it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. It really is. Like, it's one of those things that everyone should try and see, and do a 2-day hike, but just go with a better mindset and attitude than Richard Taylor, which shouldn't be hard. Right, let's talk about coming to America. How did you get here? What was that process like?
So I was in Hong Kong, and I was conscious as well. I'd been kind of like in Asia for 5 years, and I think that there's kind of an inflection point that you kind of get when you kind of like you've been there for a decent amount of time. They kind of again had this kind of term "old Asia hand" or whatever, and you would see these people and you'd meet these expats that had been there 20, 30, 40 years, and it was I kind of likened it to a kind of like an animal in a zoo, that if you tried to release it back into the wild, so if they would ever like go back to England or whatever, wherever country they came from, they just would, they would be lost. They wouldn't be able to do it. And 100%. I was conscious that I didn't want to necessarily go back to the UK. I didn't want to go back, but I knew that I didn't want to be in Asia all my life. That just wasn't appealing to me. Yeah. Now this is probably where my wife, my now wife, will have kind of maybe the story kind of might kind of change a little bit, is because I actually met my wife in Hong Kong. She's American citizen, but she was interning there over the time, and I I had an opportunity to then move with the company that I was with to Chicago, which is where they were headquartered. And I took it, and I was very conscious that I wanted to do it on my own terms. It was, because we ended up getting married, but my green card was all through work, and I was just very adamant about that. That kind of people, I think, when they kind of say, "Oh, you got an American wife," did you just get married for the green card? And that was not. I was very adamant about that. But I think she'll kind of say, did I think if I probably look back on it, there was definitely elements of it that I moved to the US for Sarah, but I also moved for and with my job. But I had the opportunity to do that. So it was kind of a combination of, I'd been in Asia for 5 years. I'd had an opportunity, there's an opportunity for me to then, work and live in the US and Chicago, and another major city. It just, everything seemed to fall into place at the same time. But I think, when I look back on that now, I kind of think about how potentially stressful that was, because I was starting quite a big job and moving, completely different country, new job. I then, we bought an apartment and I moved in with Sarah, and I'd actually never lived with a girlfriend that I had before. So it was just, that first couple of months was very interesting, I must admit, especially in terms of the fact that because I had no credit when I came to the US, actually the apartment was in her name. Yeah. So if it had all gone south, she could have kicked me out of the apartment, and it would have been her apartment. But anyway, 21 years of marriage later and 3 kids, I think we can safely say that all worked out okay.
That credit thing, no expat thinks about that. The fact that you just think you're going to land and be able to rent an apartment, because why wouldn't you be able to? Well, because it's the
Yeah.
US, and you don't
Yeah,
exist
yeah.
here.
Well, it is actually it's crazy, especially as you kind of come here when you kind of like more. I was like I think early 30s at the time, so you kind of think, well, I've got a good job. I have a decent salary. And then I remember going down. There was a Chase Bank in the building that I worked, and I was going, guys, I need a credit card, but every time I try and apply for a credit card, they go, well, we can't give you one because you got no credit. And I go, well, I know, but if you don't give me a credit card, I can't build up credit. And they'll go, and I went, guys, this is ridiculous. You get my salary in every month. And they said, okay. And I remember this still to this day. They said, okay, we'll let you have one. Here, we'll give you a $500 credit limit. I went, all right. I mean, it was,
It's better than me. I
Yeah.
had to give US Bank $300 cash for them to give me a $300 limit.
Oh,
to start building my, and I've still got it today. It's the oldest card on my credit score. It's the anchor that keeps the age of my credit limit down.
That's the other thing that I kind of say to knowing that as my kids as well. Like my oldest is just about to go off he turns 18 actually on the end of this month, is to get him a credit card and to start that credit as early as possible. But yeah, I mean, it was that situation of you kind of get here, and so I think I was lucky in that instance in terms of my girlfriend, and then fiance, and then obviously wife was American, and that eased me a little bit. I mean, obviously I came over and I had company housing to begin with, and I would have had some support to get somewhere, but I think that definitely helped me in my assimilation initially, was the fact that I also was my partner was American citizen, and
It's so annoying that though, because you think you've moved. You had a place in London. You then moved to 3 places in Asia. Were able to rent an apartment easily because that's normal. You moved to America, with the land of the immigrants, thousands of people coming here every year. You just assume they all found housing. How hard can it be? Actually, really hard. And everyone has this. It's like a secret almost that we all perpetuate. I don't know why. So, Sarah, where's Sarah from in America?
Well, she's from Evanston.
So she's close by.
Yeah. So it's actually
Right.
she's. But ironically, and here's the other connection as well. Her father was in the advertising. He was an advertising creative executive, and her herself had been an expat and had lived in Hong Kong when she was a little bit older than me. I think from 11 to 13, when he was working over there. So she is also, was an expat, and so that's another reason why I think he was still working at the company, and so she was in her just about to start her senior year at college and had an opportunity to intern. And it actually, she was interning with one of my best friends over there at the time, which is how I met Sarah, because we were on different floors on the company and we weren't working together. And it was through Fiona, who's still one of my best friends to this day, and they're in fact the family that we go on holiday with every 2 years. So we've kind of, and their kids have all, grown up together. In fact, Lila went to London for 2 weeks earlier this summer with Lucy, their youngest. And I think back to your point about technology and how I think the world has shrunk. They FaceTime virtually every day. I mean, they've been able to. I mean, they are really close. Almost as if they lived in the same town and obviously they don't. But they've been able to maintain and flourish that relationship, I think, in ways that were way beyond what we were when we were younger.
With the starting from a place of this is much better than it's wonderful that we can do these things. So starting from that place, there is a little bit of me that also misses, although I never really experienced it, but misses the remoteness or the when. If you left in the 80s or earlier, you truly were you were a long distance phone call, which was very expensive away. You were out there. You were going west. Whatever the phrase is. Yeah. And that there is a sense of adventure that just talking about it, I can feel like the excitement of the adventure. I can almost feel it, and that's gone a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I think, and that's right. And I think also the kind of like obviously social media has got a huge role in this. So the kind of like the globalization of culture. I mean, I think in some points it's actually kind of it's melded it together. If you just look at the rise of K-pop and Korean culture, over in the US now, where you would have thought that would never have, you would have thought, oh my God, that's never going to take root. And I know that is because all of these kids now, I think globally, just are way more connected. And I think, to your point, I think it does take a little bit. I mean, then you kind of think about like just kind of like artificial intelligence and, all of that stuff that you can put on goggles now and guess, and kind of like travel anywhere without leaving your couch. And without wanting to be too much of a doomsayer, I think, to your point, which is back to what I was saying earlier about, I think, travel being the best education. I think there is something about, whether that's strapping on a backpack or just deciding to, I'm going on vacation, I want to go somewhere and really experience it myself. And I think I told you this earlier as well, that in the 80s I did come to America for 6 months, and that was very much kind of, I just started my first job, which was in a bank, and I hated it, and that wasn't going to be for me. And a friend of mine was over had been over as an exchange student, and I came over and actually lived in Chapel Hill, North Carolina for 4 months in 86, 87. And that was very much, it was a different time. That was when I first came to America and thought, oh my God, this is, I was in a store and I saw a policeman and he had a gun in his holster, and I would just remember in checkout staring at him, like just going, oh my God, I've never seen a gun, never seen a gun before, It was, and just everything seemed better and bigger, and you just go into a supermarket and they had 800 different varieties of peanut butter, and they had peanut butter with jelly already mixed. It was I think mind-blowing in a different way than I think it would be if I was my 22-year-old self now and decided to backpack around for 6 months here.
Yeah, I'll never get used to the gun thing. It's funny you bring that up. Just before we did this, I went to get a slice of pizza from next door. I've got a Citarella supermarket next door to us. A little treat to myself before a podcast, and I'm waiting for the pizza, and a policeman walks past me getting his lunch, and I just don't feel comfortable, which is ironic given they're there to protect and serve.
Yeah.
But there's a man with a loaded gun next to me, and I don't like that. Yeah. Even if it's a copper.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's a kind of generational thing or kind of like a cultural thing, because we don't. Yeah. I must admit, I'm very similar in that view to it, where it's like it's just wow, but I think obviously now being here for 23 years, it's not that I kind of like see that more often, but obviously I've kind of like seen a lot more police officers by now anyway, so you're used to it. But yeah, I have to say, yeah, you're right. If you think of growing up in the UK and seeing that would just be you just basically, the only time you saw that was like when we stormed the Iraqi embassy, in London or whatever. That's when you saw. But
though, I've been here 8 years, nearly 9 years. I don't want to get used to it. I don't want. I hope if we have this conversation in 7 years' time, or 15 years in, I hope I'm not saying to you, I don't even bat an eyelid now. I don't want to get comfortable around guns. I absolutely not. And I think this is how crazy, and I kind of don't want it to kind of pivot too much on this, but Oak Park, Illinois, which admittedly it butts on into it borders right onto Chicago, but earlier this summer there was a shooting in the middle of the day on one of our main streets. It was actually a funeral procession that was coming from Chicago, but shots were fired. So it's not even a case of now when you just see it on the news and it's always, it's in Texas or it's in wherever. It's right on your doorstep, and you're right. I mean, I think talking to my kids as well, they just kind of, to them, they're just so used to soft and hard lockdown drills right from when they were in elementary school, and it normalizes it. It's like, anyway. Well, look, you've got me started now, so I'll finish with one little anecdote as well.
Okay. I know.
When we were talking before about my family and the adoption, we were doing some paperwork we had to have FBI background checks part of the adoption, and you had to have your fingerprints taken, and we had that done, and we took them to police station. You have your fingerprints done there, and the machine was broken, so we were having them done manually. and we were taken to a room in the police station, and a very nice policeman was taking our fingerprints, and there was a stack, and I'm talking about a stack of paperwork. I looked at them, and they were all applications for concealed carry. We're in Connecticut. And I said to the policeman, like, what is going on with all this? Is this normal? He's like, no, it's not. This is unusually, there's a lot, unusually so. And he went on to tell us it's because everyone's scared that Biden's going to come in, or Trump's going to lose, and Biden's going to take all the guns off them. I'm like, wait, what's going on here? Like, what is this? People having these conversations in real life and then actually taking action and applying for a concealed carry because they're scared Biden's going to come and take the guns. And then he went on to tell us, then we had to sit through a lecture on how, good guys with guns are better than, the talking points.
Yeah.
But I heard them in person in a police station next to a stack of concealed carry permits. Yeah. And it was really eye-opening. Well,
I think that's when you kind of I think that's when it's real. It becomes you actually see, that before I think, you can easily try and navigate life and kind of think that that's not there until you're really confronted with it. Yeah.
Well, I bet you thought, Chicago's got these problems with Oak Park, that's not the America I live in. Greenwich, Connecticut. This is New York, commuter town, like hedge fund center of the universe.
Yeah.
Did not think in Greenwich, Connecticut, that there would be a stack, a 1 foot tall stack of. It was disappointing that this happens in real life, and it was disappointing it happens in my town where I did not expect to see it.
Yeah.
But anyway. Well, I tell you what, let's use that as a segue. And
that's
what
a
else?
Good pivot.
What else surprised you? So you've been here 23 years. You're married to an American. You've got American kids.
Well, they're dual citizens, but yes, they were born and raised
dual citizens.
Yes, they are. Yeah. I would say that, especially when it comes to sports. Especially my middle kid Lila, she's really into soccer. I see I said soccer there again because I've been here for too long. All my English friends are really going to eviscerate me on that one. I can tell. I think maybe because the men's team is better than the American men's team. She's a very passionate English supporter. So she was when they were playing each other in the World Cup, she was supporting England. And actually, Hannah, my younger daughter, we were over in London at the time when that England-America game was. So she was in a pub in London watching it. And she was like, I think more of a reluctant England fan then, but she got the full experience. So,
it's a lot.
Yeah, I think, in a way, I think, they are. They are. I think they're, and maybe it's because it's a little bit different, because like a lot of, most of their, nearly all their friends, they don't have parents that have got different citizenship. So, but I mean, they're American, they're born and raised here, and they have a different accent than I do. So
it's a huge privilege of having two passports. It really is. Like, I don't know if they take it for granted or not, because and I'm not judging them for it. It's hard not to, but as someone who's been through the immigration process and all that, and having two passports is, I still have to pinch myself sometimes. And we've got our kids. We're working on the younger one, but the older one's already got his British passport, which feels good.
Nice. Yeah.
So, any surprises? Looking back on that 23-year journey, anything that you could, anything that you're looking back on you wish you'd done differently, or?
That's a great question. I don't think there's anything that I would have done differently. I mean, I when I look back on it, I'm very appreciative of the privilege that I've had and the kind of like the opportunities that have been afforded to me. Also, I was very lucky in terms of, I know that you talk about like what was the immigration process like for me. It was incredibly smooth in terms of my company sponsored me. I was on H-1B when I originally came over. They then also sponsored me for the green card. So, that was all done in the background. I just then had to go and turn up at various, governmental offices and collect it. So I was shielded from that side of it. So that just happened for me. I think I had a slightly different experience because my girlfriend, fiance, and now wife was was American, and she has, quite a large family, and I had that support network, and I grew up with there. I mean, I think we've talked to you about it as well. Although my closest friends are English, I met a group of guys playing five-a-side football when I first came over here, and they're, some of my best friends now. And ironically, we all joke, there's four of us, we all married American women, have wives, but we're all one of three boys, which is kind of crazy if you just kind of think of the probability of that just happening, because we all just met each other here. We did not know each other, and we're all from different places in England as well, ranging from Grimsby to to Walthamstow, Wandsworth, sorry. So I think, like, nothing I would have done differently. I think I've just been, look back on it, I've just been incredibly lucky. I mean, it's been a wonderful experience. It still continues to be a wonderful experience to me. I'm going through all those kind of life stages. I mean, my son is now just about to go off to college, and we're moving him in a couple of weeks' time. He's going to Mizzou, and I will then get to experience the US college system that I never did. I mean, as a parent, but just also, the privilege that entails. I mean, I think I'm very conscious that it has been a very lucky and privileged lifestyle that I've been able to have over here.
Yeah. I mean, if you can crack it, America has got a lot to offer lifestyle-wise.
Absolutely. And I think, that was kind of back to your other point, and I know that you kind of have this question about, what does the American dream mean to me? I don't know, stealing your thunder for asking that.
No, go ahead, please.
But because I was thinking a lot about that, since we spoke the last time about it, and I think, and it's to that point, and it builds on the point that I was making, which was, I think it's the kind of this illusion, if you will, or a facade of abundant opportunity. Now, and I think that America's just been amazing that they've been able to, maintain that and continue to sell that, if you will, to the world, because I think that there is this kind of I don't know. I think there is this belief that anyone can come here, and if they work hard enough, then they can, become a million or just make a huge success of themselves. And I don't necessarily. I mean, whilst I think that there's elements of that of this true, is that any different than any other, country or any Western, first world country? I mean, I don't know, but I think this ability for them to continually to play into that, and that people collectively believe that. But and the reason why I kind of said that it was kind of the illusion of abundant opportunity is that I do really feel that, yes, I think to your point, if you can crack it, or if you have, and you have that that availability of opportunity, you can have a very, very comfortable and wonderful lifestyle here. But I'm also conscious that is not the same for everybody, and that is not the case for everyone.
It just is not as simple as it's made out to be. I mean, I know that's I guess the objective of any successful marketing slogan is to simplify an idea into a soundbite that can then be repeated out there ad infinitum. But that then belies what it is. It's a marketing slogan.
Yeah.
With some truth, but it's oversimplified massively.
Yeah.
Do you know what? You've just asked a fantastic question, and you said, is it any different to being in a European country and working hard? And I think it's when I ask this question, it's often implied or accepted or understood that it's not possible in those countries. That's why we came to America.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's also, that's not true, is it? Right? Capitalism's alive and well in Europe.
Yeah.
Like what?
Well, that's why I think that it's kind of, to your point, I think it's the success of them being able to continually, that you kind of like, everyone wants to come to America to make it, and I'm saying, is that really any different than if you in Germany, in France? I mean, in England, we're also a multicultural society. I say we, lapsing into that one. I haven't lived there for 23 years, but that's my identity part of it coming into it. And then in terms of like, look at London. I mean, the originals, one of the original cities of immigrants and whatever. I think you just work. I think, if you apply yourself and work hard and have the availability of opportunity, is it any different than anywhere else? And again, I know I almost as I hear myself talk, I can probably hear some people listening and going, listen to Richard here, just like kind of like just of all the advantages he's had of America, and he's kind of like bad mouthing it, and that would be missing my point. Because I think I'm very conscious of what I've enjoyed and been able to build here, but also I think equally as conscious that it is not the same for everybody.
Richard, people who interpret people asking difficult questions of themselves, or not even difficult, just insightful questions of themselves and their surroundings, people who interpret that, or people questioning what's going on around them, people who interpret things like that as a negative or slander, do themselves or anyone else no favors. That's that whole thing. When you if I don't know if you ever find yourself in this position where you say something negative about America, everyone's like, well, go back if you don't like it. Well, that's not very helpful, is it? And also, FYI, if I was back in the UK, I would be complaining incessantly about many things right now, and I'd have nowhere else to go. So you can criticize constructively or otherwise what's going on around you, and still love it, or still see the good parts in it. Like, imagine in a world, and this is, maybe we're getting too deep here. This is one of America's problems: is it's not critical of itself enough. I absolutely, and I think again, it's kind of like it's built on that years of exceptionalism. This American exceptionalism in terms of like we're projected as always being the best in the world. Everyone wants to come here. Everyone wants to be like us. We export our culture, and I think after a while, you kind of to your point, is like everyone, not everyone, but a substantial amount of people buy into the American dream. Whatever that is. And I think another interesting part of that slogan kind of almost is like, well, it can be whatever you want it to be. It almost kind of like it mythically creates its own, mysticism, if you will. Whereas, I think that you're right, that there's not enough, they're not very good on introspection, I think, but that's just, It's just a little anecdote. When I worked in New York, I worked with this American guy, a weird chap. A strange chap. You lived in Norwalk, which is just on the road from me here in Connecticut, and used to travel into New York, had done for decades. Concealed carry sort of guy. Would go to the supermarket shopping on a Saturday with a gun in his holster.
That's really got to you, that whole concealed carry.
People carry guns. I just think there's something pathological about that. But anyway, just now I've alienated half the people who may or may tune into this. Anyway, he was he was a weird guy, this guy. And one day he made a comment about New York being the best city in the world. And I love New York. I love New York. I spent time in there recently, and it's great to be back. I love New York. I think it's a fantastic city. But this guy's been nowhere. No, literally nowhere. I'm like, how do you know? He's always just, everyone knows it's the greatest city in the world. I was like, well, by what measure? I was triggered. This guy triggered me anyway. And it's like, I'm not saying it's not the best city in the world, but you don't know. There's just this myth. You've just been sold the slogan. It's a wonderful city, but on some measures, it's a terrible city. And it's completely subjective. So anyway, I got very wound up about that. You something you said before meant about the American dream means different things to different people. Let me ask you then, what's your American dream?
I think it comes. I think for me, it just comes down to kind of like fundamentals from my perspective, which is just the ability to provide for my family, and and almost that cliched thing of being able to give them opportunities that I never had myself. And but having said that, I think I've had which is another reason why I kind of almost like want to kick them out and go travel for a year, just backpack and go around. But I think just giving them a good solid foundation to allow them to go out and be who they want and pursue what they want. And I think that I've been able to do that here. So I guess if that was like, if I was to try and distill like what it meant to me, or that what is my American dream, it's to then it's that really is to be able to provide a solid and a meaningful foundation for my family to go on and succeed in whatever they want to do.
Wonderful. Sounds like you're doing just that.
I know it's that kind of, like I said, that sounds very hallmarky, doesn't it? But I mean that's that is my honest response.
What does your future look like?
Yeah, that is actually that's a really good question. Actually, I was talking to my mum the other day, and she was going, "Remember, you were saying you wanted to retire when you were 50?" And I said, "Yeah, that's before I had kids. When I was a little bit older, Mum." But I said, "Yeah, but you know, all joking aside, I don't know. I mean, I still don't see myself moving back to the UK. But you know, I think never say never. You know, is a thing that I, you know, kind of like is a phrase I always kind of like, you know, like to say. Always keep your options open. Mm-hmm. But I think if I'm looking to the kind of short to the middle term, it's still to continue to build my life and my career in the US. I love Chicago. Chicago, I think, is an amazing city.
Yeah.
People can complain about the winters and stuff like that, and I'm like going, you have no idea. In England, you know, at least it's sunny when it's like -20. You know, it's I think you kind of get that seasons. I think it is truly, you know, I think back to your point about you know, your friend or your acquaintance saying that New York was the best city in the world. I've got huge affection for London as well. I have to say, I absolutely love London as well.
Yeah, me too.
I think if the weather could just be slightly better, I think I would definitely move back there in a heartbeat. But I absolutely love Chicago. It's been an amazing place to raise my family and to experience. I've also had the opportunity to travel quite a lot. So I want to continue to travel. And then I don't know. It depends. You know. We're not quite there yet, but Sarah and I would like then evaluate what we're like as empty nesters. So we've got about 4 years left before Hannah goes off to college, and then, you know, where do we look? Probably, do I see myself? Probably, I'd like to think that I probably have, you know, a couple of a move or a couple of moves still left in me. That's the nomadic side of me, because
I get it. Totally.
Here, you know, for the long, so I've got a little bit itchy feet, but I think that's when the time's right. What that looks like, I don't know. I mean, and that's back to my philosophy of like really trying to keep my options open.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get itchy feet. I'm bedding down now. We've got, as I told you before, I've got a 4-year-old, a 1-year-old, an aging dog, another rambunctious terror of a dog, and bought a house, and we're here, we're settling in, having done, I think, 11 moves in 10 years or something silly. Something really silly. 11 house moves.
Yeah.
But now we're bedding in, and my instinctive reaction after about the 2-year mark was like, I got to get out of here. I got to go somewhere else. Got to do something. Got to move. And my wife was like, just calm down. This is what you do. Just settle down.
Yeah.
Get back in your box.
It's funny you say that, Richard, because it was when I'd been here. I think I remember at the time when I was coming up to my 4th year in Chicago, and I think I turned around to Sarah and I was like going, you know what? This is now the longest I've ever stayed in any one place in my entire life, and I was, 40. It was crazy, and I remember like just you're right, kind of thinking, I don't know about that itchy feet, but I just think you've just like, oh my God, you've just like that whole time has just been constant movement and moving. And I think you're right, bedding down, having a family, that I think that does change that, to a certain extent. And kind of I moved 3 different times when I've been in Chicago, but this has definitely been the longest I've lived anywhere in Oak Park. It's like nearly 12 years now, and I think, in a few more years' time, I think I'll definitely be ready for another move. But yeah, 11 times in 10 years. That's pretty impressive, Richard.
Yeah, it was a lot. As we wrap up here, Richard, there is something I want to just explore with you. So you have not taken US citizenship yet. You've been here a long time. You've got American family, American kids. Been here longer than anywhere else. You don't have the same sort of home anchor. Like I said before, like I'm from Bolton. Never going back to Bolton, but I am a Boltonian. You seem like a prime candidate for grabbing US citizenship, and yet you haven't. So if you don't mind, talk to us about that.
And I know if my wife were here, she would be literally just leaning in right now. And understandably so. I mean, I think she's, because I think logically, I think she's applying logic to something that isn't fully logical. And I think it comes down to identity, and I think it comes down to, And I agree. I don't think necessarily you have to have I'd suddenly lose that British identity if I became an American citizen. But there's something about me still having that passport, that it's an anchor to where I'm from and who I am. Because I'm, back to the name of your podcast. But I still feel that I'm coming up. I think the next inflection point for me is when I'm, and it's a few years off now, but it's when I would have lived outside of the UK more than I'd lived in it, but I still think that I'm English, I'm British, and I don't logically know how to fully maybe explain that to you in terms of it's something that I think is important to me, and I know because I've spoken to many people about it, especially kind of attorneys, and there's tons of them in Oak Park as well, like going, well, you do realize that you could theoretically, and I think a lot of I could get deported still, and actually for things that that's quite a lot more minor than people think, which is interesting. Not that I plan on doing any of them, but you're right. I mean, theoretically, someone could knock at the door, I could get a letter and go, and you've got to get out, and I think that that is, I think that's more of what I think is driving Sarah to say, look, what, you're not going back, or what are you doing? And I don't know. I think
that's what drove me.
Yeah.
I got these two young kids now, and it was just removing one, and no matter how minor and niggling, but just removing one worry from my mind that I can come and go as I please. No one's kicking me out.
I know, and it's interesting. Yeah, because I think also in talking to someone else about that as well, I think it also means that if I think I can't go and live somewhere else for longer than I can't be out of the country for 6 months either. And again, I think that's not really applied to me yet, and it might do. So I think that, again, back to my never say never mantra, but I think it also speaks to, there's something still, I'm not ready yet, and I think that it's you're right, that logic doesn't necessarily apply, and maybe it's it's sense of identity and who I am, and that would be, I feel like if I did that, I would be losing my anchor. I don't know. That was probably a bit of COD psychology, because not too many people have asked that, apart from my wife constantly.
Okay, so I'm a dual citizen, recent dual citizen, British, and I still consider myself British. So I'm just interested in, what do you think? Is it the ceremony? I didn't think twice about the ceremony, to be honest, but Sarah, who I just talked to recently on this podcast, for her, she found the ceremony really hard. She found delivering that oath, because she said, I am British, I feel British, and she found that really hard. I didn't. Is it the oath? Is it the passport? What is it?
Yeah. I guess you can cross your fingers behind your back when you're giving it. I've actually been to a ceremony. Actually, a really good friend of ours, and actually a childhood friend of Sarah's, was a Canadian citizen, and she got. So I've been to one of those ceremonies actually, and I don't. Again, that's a really good point. I don't know. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it that much, because I think another thing that happens with a green card, it lasts for 10 years. So I get it, and I go, this is the time. I'll go through the motions. I'll start doing it, and already I think my latest one is 20. I think it's 28, or 26 or 28. And then you kind of go, oh shit! It's like nearly, time again. I'll do it next time. So, and I think also that other stuff, because I must admit, I am I would think I do think of myself as a fairly logical person and plan out and want to eliminate risk for certain situations. So I think, to your point, all of those things would indicate, Richard, go and just become a US citizen, and then you're okay. You're reducing that element of risk. I think that part of that some of it is, well, I just don't think that's going to ever happen to me, and I'm okay with that. So I haven't really, to your point, Richard, really thought long and hard about, like, what is it actually that's stopping me doing that? You're right, I don't know, and I think even just talking about it now, I mean, no, I don't think the oath would be this kind of insurmountable hurdle, especially when I could still be dual citizen. That's the other thing, is people kind of go, well, you can still be a dual citizen. It's just, I'm like, I don't know. Part of it as well is, and don't want to sound like it's too frivolous, but it's when those people are at the train station and they kind of go, and they're just hounding you to sign their petition or whatever. And I love the fact I can just go, I'd love to, but I'm not a youth. I'm not a youth. And then you're invisible to them. Then they just, leave you alone. I mean, I guess that's a very minor point. And then also I can't serve on jury duty, which I don't know if I told you this as well. It's like, I don't know why they can't on the database somewhere just flag me as I have been summoned so many times, and then I have to, like, literally, you have to send a photocopy of your green card, because obviously they kind of, right. And just, I'm like, I was like, and it's funny, when I was in the UK, I didn't get summoned once. I was like, and it's something I actually quite like to do. My wife's been a juror and thoroughly enjoyed the process. And I was like, yeah, so that's another thing. At least I can just go, nope, sorry, boom, that's another one. But anyway, yeah.
Walk on.
Sorry. I know that kind of went off a little bit, and I don't want to mean that they go, oh my God, Richard doesn't want to vote and doesn't want to serve on a jury, get out, It's like, yeah, that maybe you can edit that out. I don't know, because that didn't come across as particularly civic-minded.
We got that was just the funny part of it, but it's something more, I don't know if psychological is the right word, but it's something more to do with your identity. I get the impression it's much more tied up in your identity and Britishness, and not wanting to sever that, even if it's only psychologically severing it, because you're not severing it really.
Yeah. Well, I think it's without kind of, like, if I was trying to sum it up, it's like, to your point, like, I'm not from anywhere. I was born in Epsom, and my dad had already moved after 4 months. We were into a different place, so. The one anchor I have is my passport. That's who I am. And I know that probably sounds very weird, but I feel like if I gave, or if I kind of become an citizen, and then that's like, I've given up that, So I don't know. Wow, that made me really kind of think about it.
You have to, if one day, come back on in 5 or 10 years, and if you've got your citizenship there, we can explore what that was like for you.
Yeah,
or if you haven't.
If you ever do kind of like, always an expat. Where are they now? I mean, I'm more than happy to maybe come back, and I can proudly show my American passport. I don't know, but we'll see. Never say never, Richard. Never say never.
Never say never. Okay, that's a great place to end it. That's a great place to end. Not never say never, because I think that's something as expats say a lot. So with that in mind, as we wrap up here, if anyone wants to find you, where can people find you?
Yeah, I think the best place, probably not wildly original, but is LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. I used to be on Twitter, but I'm not anymore for various reasons.
Of course, yes, right? X.
So I'm ex-Twitter and XX, but yes, I know. And they've had to take their sign down even because, but yes, I would say, LinkedIn is always, and if anyone's interested, I'm always. Love meeting people if they've got other, questions or want to, someone to experience, I don't know, had other questions about my experience. I'm more than happy to engage in that.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you for being a great guest, and thank you for being on Always an Expat.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
Cheers.